All right, deep divers, welcome. We've got something truly monumental to discuss today.
Definitely.
A development in international law that could genuinely, reshape how the world approaches climate change.
That's right.
We are talking about the International Court of Justice's, the ICJ's groundbreaking advisory opinion. It's on obligations of states in respect of climate change, and it just dropped yesterday, July 23, 2025.
It's very fresh, yes.
So for you, our listener, we've really tried to distill this incredibly complex, vital legal document, get down to its core essentials.
Yeah, it's a dense one.
Our goal is basically to equip you with the most important insights, maybe even a few surprising facts, so you're truly well informed on what this means for our planet, for our future.
Exactly. And the context here is that the UN General Assembly asked the ICJ two main things. First, what are states legally obligated to do to protect the climate system from our greenhouse gas emissions?
Okay.
And second, what happens legally speaking if they fail to meet those obligations? What are the consequences?
Right. And it's called an advisory opinion, which maybe sounds a bit soft, but it isn't just advice, is it?
Not at all. While it's not like a judgment in a specific fight between two countries, it carries immense legal weight. It clarifies the existing international law.
So it provides powerful guidance.
Exactly. For nations, for courts, everywhere. Its implications are, well, they're huge, impacting individual countries, the global community.
And ultimately you, listening right now, your future. So let's explore what this really definitive legal statement means for international law, national policies, the whole planet.
Let's do it.
Okay, so to really get the weight of this opinion, we need to understand where it came from. It wasn't just the ICJ deciding to weigh in, right?
No, not at all. This stemmed from a really powerful request directly from the UN General Assembly. Back in March 2023, they used some strong language,
Right.
calling climate change an unprecedented challenge of civilizational proportions.
Wow. Civilizational proportions, that sets the stage.
It certainly does. And it's crucial, as you mentioned, to understand the ICJ's role here. They weren't making up new rules.
Right.
Their job was, in their words, stating the existing law. So this opinion is all about clarifying what states already have to do under international law. They're not acting like a legislature.
Okay, that's a really key point. Stating the existing law. Does that mean, practically speaking, that while it's not new law, the ICJ's statement makes the existing obligations kind of undeniable now?
Precisely. That's a good way to put it. It gives an authoritative interpretation. It carries significant persuasive weight for any future legal cases or, policy decisions. It really reduces the wiggle room.
Interesting. So where did these ideas even come from? International climate responsibility, it didn't just pop up yesterday.
Oh, absolutely not. You can trace the roots back quite a way. Think about the 1972 Stockholm Declaration.
Yeah.
That was one of the first big global nods towards environmental protection.
Okay, yeah.
And then, things started heating up, scientifically speaking.
Right. By 79, the first World Climate Conference. That's when the alarm bells about fossil fuels, CO2, really started ringing loudly.
Exactly. And that scientific understanding, it really got cemented with the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, being set up in '88.
Ah, yes, the IPCC. They became the sort of go-to source for the science.
The definitive global authority, yeah.
Yeah.
And their very first big report, the first assessment report in 1990, that was pivotal.
Yeah.
Especially because it started talking about different responsibilities, industrialized nations versus developing nations.
That paved the way for the treaties then.
Absolutely. Laid the groundwork for the big ones. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change in '92, then Kyoto, and of course the huge one, the 2015 Paris Agreement.
And it's fascinating you mentioned the science. The ICJ didn't just gloss over that. They leaned into it.
They really did. They explicitly cited this relevant scientific background. They relied heavily on the IPCC reports, calling them the best available science.
And that science says,
Unequivocally, that human activities are the dominant cause of global warming since the mid-20th century. No ambiguity there.
wow.
And they included some stark figures, like global surface temperature hit 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels between 2011 and 2020.
Okay.
And maybe the most sobering stat, 42%, nearly half of all the cumulative greenhouse gas emissions since the Industrial Revolution happened between 1990 and 2019 alone.
Wait, say that again? 42%.
Since 1990, in less than 3 decades. Just think about that acceleration.
That is staggering. And the human cost you mentioned earlier.
It's immense. The opinion notes the disproportionate impact on vulnerable communities. We're talking 3.3 to 3.6 billion people, currently highly vulnerable.
Over a third of the world's population.
Exactly. This isn't some future scenario, it's right now. It really underscores why the ICJ went into such detail.
So wrapping up this sort of origin story, the ICJ's inquiry was broad, right?
Yeah.
Covered actions, inactions, state actors, non-state actors.
Very broad material scope, yes. And a global territorial scope, too. It applies to all states,
Yeah.
reflecting that climate change is seen in law as a common concern of humankind.
Okay, so identifying these obligations, where did the court actually look? You said it wasn't just one place.
Right. They didn't just pull them out of thin air. They meticulously examined this complex web of international law.
A web. Okay.
Yeah, meaning everything from the basic UN Charter to international human rights agreements, civil, political, economic, social, cultural rights, plus other environmental treaties, the Law of the Sea,
Mhm.
and even fundamental legal principles, things like due diligence, basically, taking proper care and the duty to prevent significant harm. It was really comprehensive.
Okay, so with that groundwork laid, the history, the science, the broad scope, let's get to the core. What are the specific legal obligations the ICJ identified? Where did they start?
Well, naturally, they started with the climate change treaties themselves. UNFCCC, Kyoto, and Paris.
The big three.
Exactly. And what they did first was clarify how these agreements actually fit together, because sometimes people see them as separate things.
Right.
The ICJ made it clear. They're mutually supportive. They don't conflict. Kyoto and Paris essentially build on the UNFCCC's general framework, adding greater specification. They flesh out the details.
And Paris. The ambition of the Paris Agreement seems really central here, that 1.5-degree target.
Absolutely central. The ICJ didn't just mention 1.5 degrees C. They confirmed it. Confirmed it as the parties' agreed primary temperature goal for limiting global average temperature increase.
So it's not just a nice idea anymore, it's a legal benchmark.
It's a legal benchmark, yes, solidified by later decisions, like the Glasgow Climate Pact. This confirmation provides a really powerful, undeniable legal anchor for climate action now.
Wow, okay. And how does that connect to what individual countries promise to do those NDCs?
The nationally determined contributions. This is critical. The ICJ found these are not just up to each country's whim. It's not unfettered discretion.
Okay, so they can't just promise anything.
No. States have what's called an obligation of result. They have to prepare, communicate, and keep updating their NDCs. And each new NDC must show progression. It must reflect its highest possible ambition.
Highest possible ambition.
And here's the kicker. Taken all together, collectively, these NDCs must be capable of achieving the 1.5 degrees C temperature goal.
Must be capable. So there's a collective responsibility baked in.
Exactly. It's an obligation to act with due diligence, meaning they have to take all reasonable steps to make sure their promises and everyone else's add up to hitting that target.
And you mentioned differentiation earlier, that due diligence isn't the same for everyone.
Correct. That standard is differentiated. It takes into account things like a country's historical contributions to cumulative GHG emissions, how much they've polluted in the past,
Must be right.
and also its level of development and national circumstances.
Yeah.
So, the opinion reinforces that developed countries should continue taking the lead. They're expected to pursue economy-wide absolute cuts in emissions. It's not one size fits all.
Okay, that makes sense. So that covers the specific climate treaties, but you said the court looked wider into customary international law.
Yes, and this is really important because customary law applies to all states, even if they haven't signed a particular treaty.
Ah, okay, so this binds everyone.
Pretty much. And what's fascinating is how an established rule, the duty to prevent significant harm to the environment, now explicitly applies to the climate system.
Okay.
This duty requires due diligence, using all the means at its disposal. And crucially, the ICJ clarified, this duty applies even when the harm comes from the cumulative effect of actions by many states and even private companies.
That seems huge, because climate change is a cumulative problem.
Exactly. It tackles that argument that my little bit doesn't matter. The court says, yes, it does. When combined with everyone else's, it really broadens the net for accountability.
Definitely. What else from customary law?
They also highlighted the duty to cooperate for the protection of the environment. This isn't just, a nice thing to do.
It's an obligation.
It's a fundamental customary obligation for all states. The court framed cooperation as not just morally right, but legally required. A pressing need and a legal obligation, they said. It recognizes climate change is too big for any one nation. Collective action is legally mandated.
So we have the treaties, we have customary law obligations like preventing harm and cooperating. But the ICJ's deep dive went even further. You mentioned the law of the sea.
Yes, UNCLS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Right.
UNCLS obliges states to protect and preserve the marine environment. The court said this applies to harm from anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions, too, demanding a stringent standard of due diligence.
Stringent. Okay.
And states also have to do environmental impact assessments, EIAs, for planned activities that might cause substantial pollution or harmful changes to the sea.
Okay. And wasn't there something slightly unexpected about sea level rise in maps?
Yes. A little detail that caught my eye, too.
Yeah.
The ICJ found there's no obligation under UNCLS for states to constantly update their official maritime charts or geographical coordinates just because the sea level is rising if those boundaries were properly established in the first place.
Huh. So legally, the line on the map might stay put for a while, even if the water's creeping up. Interesting quirk.
A specific legal point, yes. Now, moving beyond the environment itself, let's talk international human rights law.
Right. How does that fit in?
The ICJ explicitly acknowledged that climate change seriously messes with a whole range of basic human rights,
Like,
like the right to life itself, the right to health, the right to an adequate standard of living which covers basics like food, water, housing, even rights like privacy, family life, your home,
it touches everything.
pretty much.
Uh-huh.
And they also highlighted the disproportionate impacts, again, on women, children, indigenous peoples.
And was there a sort of aha moment here regarding a specific right?
Yes, definitely. A profound one, I think. The ICJ stated its opinion that the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment is actually essential for the enjoyment of other human rights.
Okay, so it's foundational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This right, which the UN General Assembly affirmed in a 2022 resolution, means states are required to take necessary measures to protect the climate system so that people can effectively enjoy all those other rights.
What kind of measures?
Things like mitigation, adaptation, setting environmental standards, passing laws, regulating companies. It directly links human rights duties to climate action. It basically says you can't uphold human rights if you ignore climate change.
That's a powerful connection. Okay, so the court has laid out all these obligations from treaties, customary law, human rights. What about accountability? What happens if a state doesn't meet these obligations?
Right. The bottom line. The ICJ addressed the legal consequences arising from internationally wrongful acts, which is lawyer speak for breaking these rules. And crucially, they confirmed that the standard rules on state responsibility, the general principles for how states are held accountable when they break international law, the ones codified by the International Law Commission, those do apply to breaches of climate obligations.
So no special exceptions for climate change?
No. They specifically looked at the Paris Agreement's mechanisms for things like loss and damage or compliance checks.
Uh-huh.
And they found those mechanisms don't create some special bubble that excludes the normal rules of state responsibility. Why? Because those Paris mechanisms are generally non-adversarial, or they don't actually provide remedies in the way state responsibility rules do.
Got it. Now, what about those tricky bits we talked about? Proving harm, linking a specific country's emissions to specific damage. That seems really hard with climate change.
It is complex, no doubt. But the ICJ offered some reassurance. They said their legal standard for causation needing a sufficiently direct and certain causal nexus is actually flexible enough to handle climate change cases.
Flexible enough?
It means scientific evidence is key. Those IPCC reports linking overall human activity to specific types of climate events or attributing certain extreme weather events, that kind of data will be crucial in court to establish those causal links. It's about using the best available science to meet that legal test.
Okay, that makes sense. Science meets law. Now, what about who can complain? Does a country have to be directly flooded or something to have a legal interest?
That's where this powerful concept comes in. Erga omnes obligations.
Erga omnes.
Meaning towards all. The ICJ found that obligations to protect global environmental commons like the atmosphere, the climate system, are owed to the international community as a whole. They are the concern of all states.
So any state could potentially step up.
That's the implication. Any state has a legal interest in ensuring these obligations are upheld, not just the ones suffering the most direct impacts at that moment. It potentially opens the door much wider for holding states accountable.
That could be really significant. So if a state is found to have breached its obligations, what kinds of remedies did the ICJ talk about?
They outlined the standard remedies under international law. First, cessation. If the wrongful act is ongoing, The state has to stop it.
Like repealing a bad law or policy?
Exactly. Revoking harmful administrative or legislative measures, for example. Second, non-repetition. The state has to provide assurances, guarantees that it won't do it again.
Okay.
And third, full reparation to the states that were injured by the breach.
Reparation. What does that involve?
It can take different forms. Restitution, trying to wipe out the consequences, restore the situation to how it was before, if possible. Compensation, paying for the damage caused. And the court even mentioned this could be a global sum based on equity if pinning down the exact damage amount is too complex.
Interesting. A global sum.
And finally, satisfaction, which might be something like a formal acknowledgement of the wrongdoing, an apology, that sort of thing.
Okay. So pulling this all together, this ICJ advisory opinion really feels like a landmark moment.
It absolutely is.
It's explicitly solidifying these legal obligations across so many areas of international law, treaties, custom, human rights, all focused on protecting the climate system. It really seems to boost accountability.
Definitely. And it underscores that global, interconnected nature of the crisis.
It feels like it shifts the whole conversation, doesn't it? From what states should do, maybe morally,
To what they are legally obligated to do. That's the fundamental shift.
Yeah.
And the practical implications, I think, are fascinating.
Yeah.
That strong emphasis on due diligence, making it clear NDCs aren't just optional homework.
Right.
And that erga omnes idea that these are obligations owed to everyone, it all provides a much stronger legal foundation for pushing for more climate action. It could fuel future legal challenges too.
Gives more tools to those pushing for change.
Empowers nations, civil society, potentially, yes,
Yeah.
to demand climate responsibility based on clear legal grounds.
The court itself seemed quite aware of the potential impact. They ended by saying they hoped their conclusions would allow the law to inform and guide social and political action to address the ongoing climate crisis.
A clear call for the law to have real-world impact.
It really is. And that leaves us, and you, our listener, with some pretty big questions to chew on, doesn't it? Like, what does this actually mean for climate policy developing in your country? How might this opinion change the strategies of vulnerable nations or maybe even climate activists on the ground?
Yeah, how will it be used?
And maybe what new questions does this very definitive legal statement raise for you personally about our collective responsibility to the planet, to future generations? Lots to think about.
Indeed.
Thank you for diving deep with us today on this really critical development.